get out of it, man. It's so quiet. It's dark. It's damp. You sent us here, of all places, but you forgot to tell us what to do.
What's going on, everybody? This is DK Dynamite, and tonight what I have for you guys is a real interesting video. We're going to be talking about the return of some very familiar faces, some new statements from Treyarch about future DLC, and the controversy surrounding easy Easter eggs in Black Ops Cold War Zombies. Definitely stay tuned. But before we jump into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and be sure to use code DYNAMITE if you want to save 10% on any Control Freak orders. Their link is, of course, down below in the description. Also, as a reminder, the Samantha Max's store bundle does release in a couple of days on March 4th for 400 COD points. It'll come with legendary Ether cover Samantha skin and the reactive blueprint for the AK-74U, known as the Z-74U. It'll also come with a Zombies Teddy Bear charm, a legendary emblem, and a calling card. So I'm really excited for the bundle, but I know what you guys are probably thinking. That should have been a reward for completing the main Easter egg on Firebase Z, and I completely agree. In a perfect world, that probably would happen. But it reminds me of Black Ops 4 with the gauntlets, where completing some of those tough gauntlets should have unlocked some really cool animated camos that fit the themes of those maps, instead of just unlocking a sticker, but we can't always get everything we want. Now, starting off with a familiar face, the Avogadro. So as you guys last saw him, we got to face him at the very ending of the Alpha Omega Easter egg, and at the very end, we sent him to the Hanford site, also known as Transit. So that seemingly set up a Transit remake, which we unfortunately never saw. Now, last we heard about any Victus remakes, we were told that they're on an indefinite hold, similar to Modern Warfare 2 Remastered multiplayer. Who knows what's going on with those maps? They could still pop up at some point in the future of Black Ops Cold War, but for now, here's something really important that a lot of people still don't understand. In Alpha Omega, there's a radio that confirms that Russman and Broken Arrow took a portion of the Avogadro, the one we see in that map. They took a portion of him and sent that portion to the Hanford site, Black Ops 2's Transit, and that's why we see an Avogadro in Black Ops 2's Transit. But I could see why it was a bit confusing, and people had thought that it was a prequel to Black Ops 2 Transit by setting up the Avogadro with an Alpha Omega. That just wasn't the case, though. It was a different Avogadro, but a coincidence that we happened to send him to Hanford just as Russman did all those years ago. But at the very least, at the end of TAG, we collapsed the multiverse and all of that was sent into the Dark Ether. What if I told you guys the Avogadro has already made a reappearance in Black Ops Cold War? So as you guys may have noticed, in the Outbreak mode, there is a new boss called the Tempest. The Tempest is actually a Dark Ether version of the Avogadro, and before you call that a stretch, first off, look at the heart in the center of the Tempest. It's the exact same heart model that we saw on the Avogadro from Alpha Omega. If you still don't believe that, fine, but if you actually pull up the model of the Tempest from Black Ops Cold War's files, he's also referred to as an Avogadro. So I think it's great that they've already brought back the Avogadro in some way, but my question for you guys is this the only time we're going to be seeing the Tempest play any type of role in Zombies, or will Tempest be brought back as a mini-boss in a future Zombies map for Black Ops Cold War? If anything, I'm still questioning whether or not Outbreak will have anything quote-unquote new in the mode, or will Outbreak always have reused assets from other Zombies maps, Fireteam maps? Could there be a point in time one day in Black Ops Cold War where we see a truly new Outbreak experience on a brand new map with brand new bosses and features that won't ever get featured in any other Black Ops Cold War Zombies content? Now, I feel like it is being set up for Victus to eventually face the Avogadro once again. It feels like Alpha Omega was setting that up for Black Ops 4. Maybe now the Tempest is what's setting that up for a future Black Ops Cold War map. I wouldn't be surprised if a future DLC map in this game brings the Tempest in as the mini-boss for that map, or a different version of him somehow, and then on that same map, we get some type of closure for Victus through radios or intel, something that explains what happens to them after they were sent to the Dark Ether after the events of Tag Your Toe In. But when it comes to the mini-bosses, weapons, perks, the mystery box, things that were sent into the Dark Ether after Black Ops 4 have come out looking a little bit differently. So I'm glad that they've already started doing that with the Mangler, now we have with the Avogadro, so who knows what else is going to come out in future DLC experiences. But last we saw Victus, they assisted Primus Nikolai in finishing the grand scheme to close off the multiverse, but in the process were sent to the Dark Ether themselves. I wouldn't expect Craig Houston to leave that off hanging like that. I would at least expect some closure in some form in a future DLC map, whether it's intel or radio, some type of explanation, right? I understand completely that the arcs of Primus and Ultimus are over, and it's been made very clear, and they reiterated that in a recent article that I'm going to go over later in this video. When it comes to Victus, I'm like, look, they got used and abused all throughout Black Ops 2. They have a pretty tragic story of being used and abused, just for somebody else's goal. full, and it took a while to understand what happened to them after Buried. We of course got the Call of Duty Zombies comic, which filled in the gap perfectly, and that transitioned us into the storyline of Black Ops 4. So Craig Houston worked everything out, right? Making sure that Victus had a place in the storyline again, but now we're back to square one where we're like, alright, what could have happened to them? And we'll have to wait and see, right? It makes me think though, if they do come back in a future map, will they be like Ravenoff, where they assist you on the sidelines, giving you objectives or teaching you things, or will they actually be playable operators at some point, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, considering we have Samantha that's going to be playable in a few days, maybe Kravchenko and Weaver will be added in a future update, I'm sure they will, so it wouldn't be too unreasonable to see Victus added as operators, but at the same time I'm like, look, I don't really see that happening too soon, but I at least expect some type of closure to whatever story Craig has going, but I trust him to understand these characters in the best way, and to know when is the best time to address something like Victus. But another thing I was saying during Black Ops 4 was that Green Run would have worked perfectly as a Blackout map, and we got portions of Transit through multiplayer, other parts of Blackout. Green Run is a perfect size, in my opinion, for a Battle Royale sized map on the scale of Alcatraz. I would have definitely saw that happening if Black Ops 4's budget didn't get cut early, and if Treyarch didn't have to work on Call of Duty 2020, which is now Black Ops Cold War, and it would have made sense, right? You have assets for Green Run all done in Blackout, and then you just port that over into a Transit remake for Black Ops 4 Zombies. I would have saw that coming, but that could still happen even in Black Ops Cold War in the form of Outbreak. So as we know, it was confirmed that future Outbreak maps may not be Fireteam maps, but could be non-Fireteam maps. We don't know what that means yet, but either they're gonna make an actual large-scaled Zombies experience just for Outbreak that we haven't seen in previous maps, or they could bring back locations like Green Run and merge that with other things, and then you have a new Outbreak map that essentially is the new version of Transit. One thing I want to tell you guys as well is that back during the Black Ops 4 season, I was told by somebody very reliable the following quote: "It's Transit, but ... you'll see what I mean." So that was referring to what the Transit remake was like for Black Ops 4. Maybe it was originally going to be for a Blackout experience that was going to get ported to Zombies with different gameplay mechanics, but now that quote makes sense for what Outbreak could end up being if Transit gets ported as an Outbreak experience. So with that, I think that's probably the best way to bring Transit back without being too repetitive, without repeating the same mistakes that the map had during 2012. I could definitely see that happening, and I'm sure everybody out there has realized that as well, right? You know, Transit as an experience was ahead of its time. They were just held back significantly by hardware, by time constraints. I mean, Black Ops 2 was on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. That's old, that's ancient now, and the fact they pulled off something like Transit was insane. And funny enough, the way Outbreak works with teleporting or warping to different Fireteam maps in the same game was actually how the nav card Easter egg was supposed to work back during Transit. So originally, in Black Ops 2, after doing the Buried endgame, there's going to be Easter egg with the nav cards that involved being able to play on all the Victus maps in a single match. Of course, I couldn't have saw that happening without significant problems, crashing, freezing. That wouldn't have worked on that hardware back during 2012, but that's what they had in mind, and Outbreak kind of is that now. So imagine seeing an ultimate Victus Outbreak experience where we get to warp from Transit, Dire Wraiths to Buried in a single game. And we're of course not forgetting the fact that the entirety of Buried was added into Blackout, and it wasn't just Buried itself, it was the entirety of that map, but then above ground was the multiplayer map Outlaw, which is a standoff remake, but it fit the aesthetic of what Buried was going for perfectly for Blackout. There are people out there who genuinely believe that it was just a location added to Blackout. I'm like, you seriously don't think that they put the entirety of Buried, not a portion, but the entirety of Buried into Blackout to set up a future Buried remake in Black Ops 4 Zombies? That's of course what they were doing, but obviously plans changed. In terms of what's going to happen with Buried in the future is unknown, but I think Outbreak is probably the best bet for where we can next see some potential Victus remakes, instead of, you know, having a DLC 3 or a DLC 4 be a full-on remake such as Black Ops 4's DLC. You can just put remakes into Outbreak as a mode. I mean, that's the best way to go about this while releasing brand new original Zombies maps throughout the DLC season, and DLC is free anyway, so who cares? But I think that's the best approach they can go with if they want to bring back classic maps like that. Now here's where things get spicy. We have an official quote from Treyarch themselves during an IGN India interview regarding the return of familiar faces. So as Craig said, I think the thing that's really important is that the previous incarnations, which we call the Ether story, which involve Richtofen and all those characters, that came to a definite end at the end of Black Ops 4 season, and we were passionate about not rewriting his story. One of the things I said was that those characters did what they did to try and create a singular world where zombies didn't exist, and unfortunately because of the experiments in World War II, they were only half right. There is no longer a time-traveling, multi-dimensional story. This is grounded Cold War, which of course is direct feedback and the response to the community's outcry that the story was getting too confusing. I mean, I get it. it, there were some inconsistencies here and there, but Treyarch did the best they could to clear all of that up with Black Ops 4 Zombies maps, and did a great job, but they're bringing things back, scaling it down to a more grounded experience that's easier for new players to fully understand story-wise. And then Craig said this, right? There's a clear continuity between Black Ops 4 and current events in Zombies. For those out there that are tag-or-toting deniers who weren't happy with the ending of Black Ops 4, for those out there that had their own headcanon for how Ether should have ended, just know that Black Ops 4 is 100% still canon. So Craig said, at the end of Black Ops 4 storyline, we had two clear characters that needed to be referenced going forward, and that was Samantha Maxis and Edward Richtofen, the young versions of them both. So we have shown people what Maxis is up to. Any other characters that might reappear will be dealt with in later seasons. So who is that referring to, right? Obviously Eddie, but what if that also is referring to Victus? I mean, he did say characters plural, and he didn't want to give it away that Eddie's going to reappear at some point in the story. If anything, I feel like Eddie is a massive plot twist reveal during like the end of DLC 3 or the end of DLC 4. Hopefully not a cliffhanger at the very end of the season where we have to wait until Treyarch's next game to figure out what it all meant. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised about that happening either. They could pull an Origins and do some real questionable cliffhanger that has us scratching our heads for a couple of years. Treyarch's next game might not be until 2023, which is insane to think about. But we then have a Maxis diary entry, which sets up something pretty spicy. So as it says, sometimes I find it hard to sleep, even though I look forward to it. When I dream, I see faces of people I care about, and faces of people that don't care for me. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two, but one face stands out from all others, the face of a child, a boy. He is lost, damaged, I want to help him, but somehow I feel that he is dangerous. Dreams are unreliable, witnesses as to am I, sometimes I find it hard to sleep. So that's real interesting, and I'm more than positive that boy is Eddie, and she may have seen flashbacks of characters like Primus and Ultimus, or even some others from the previous Ether storyline. I'm wondering if the Ludwig Maxis of this new universe is alive, or is going to play a role in the future. Very curious about that, but that could definitely be referring to some Eddie setup, and I think, like I said, Eddie won't be actually properly introduced as either a character or a playable character until deeper into the season. Hopefully he gets introduced as like a Gurad Krovi DLC 3 ending teaser, and then we get to, you know, unravel his character in DLC 4. Would hope to see that, but let's not get our hopes up just yet. We'll just have to wait and see what plans Craig has for this new Eddie character. But I almost feel like that statement alone confirms Nolan North won't be returning to voice this new version of Eddie. And if you think about it, doesn't that make sense, right? Samantha said he's a damaged person, and Craig is saying that he doesn't want to rewrite Richtofen or bring that same character back into the fold. So would it really make sense to have Nolan North voice this version of Eddie? I mean, it seems like the character of Eddie is just going to be in the shadow of the Richtofen we know and love, but will be a different person entirely. Now, Nolan North is a talented actor. He can just come in and, you know, make Eddie sound like somebody we've just never heard in previous Black Ops games. Sure, that could happen, but I feel like a recast is very, very likely at this point. But in terms of Nolan North's TikTok from pre-release, as I've always said, that TikTok means nothing. He made the TikTok before Black Ops Cold War even released, and of course he said that he wasn't cast in Black Ops Cold War. We all know that because Eddie isn't in Die Maschine, so why would he have been at the studio recording lines if his character's not featured in the launch map? I've always said that. I'm like, look, if Eddie is a future character for DLC 3 or DLC 4, they'll bring Nolan North back if they want him at some point in 2021 to record lines. He wouldn't be recording lines for Die Maschine if Eddie's not in the map. It just doesn't make sense. But last but definitely not least, we have the confirmation that Easter eggs are being made easier in Black Ops Cold War Zombies. So Treyarch confirmed that less than 2% of the Zombies community has completed Easter eggs in past Black Ops games. That's surprising considering lots of guides on YouTube for different Easter eggs have millions of views. So think about that in perspective now. Millions of people have watched these guides, but the millions of people are in the 2% of the entire Zombies community to do Easter eggs. With that being said, right, they're making Easter eggs a lot easier in Black Ops Cold War, and it's pissed people off. And it's pissed off specific people that are hardcore Easter egg hunters. And you know what? I get it. I mean, we could talk about this all day. I get what they're going for. Business-wise, it makes sense. They want to appeal to the most amount of people possible. People that have Warzone free to play could get a taste of Zombies through Warzone now with the Outbreak event. It might encourage them to buy Black Ops Cold War. Therefore, they'll be trying the full Zombies mode, and if they complete the Zombies Easter eggs easily, since the Easter eggs are fairly simple now, they'll be more encouraged to keep playing future DLC, spending money on microtransactions. It's all a business thing, and I totally get it. Could there be a compromise to where Easter eggs are still kept on a level of difficulty that hardcore fans would enjoy, but still could be accessible to some of the casuals that are just stepping into zombies for the first time. If they can find a balance for that in the future, I wouldn't mind it, but this is something to get used to now. This is not something that the vocal minority can fix. This is something that was determined based on data and is being reevaluated accordingly for future Black Ops games. So I know you're probably thinking, what about the World War II zombies approach, where you have a casual Easter egg and a hardcore Easter egg? They did it for the Final Reich, and I think it worked for the most part, alright? You can have a casual Easter egg allowing you to earn the achievement or quote-unquote beat the map, but then you can have a hardcore Easter egg where you get better rewards for completing it, more storyline understanding, better wonder weapons, dark ops. I would love to see that. In a perfect world, it would be great, but think about the development time that would go into that. It would be a pain for Treyarch to do. Considering the pandemic right now, that's probably not ideal for zombie maps going forward. But looking at the statement, it looks like every map going forward could be following the same formula, which is becoming problematic, and we can talk more about that in future streams and other videos. But that is about it. This has been DK Dynamite. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comment section. What are your thoughts on the return of familiar faces, new Outbreak experiences, and of course, easy Easter eggs, which are taking over the zombie scene? Leave all your thoughts down below. Really hope you enjoyed, and peace out, everyone.